Welcome back to the Habit Based Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Ewell. Today, I got a very special guest, Tiffany Clevenger. She is the creator of the Cycle Breakers and she's a trauma hypnotist. Tiffany, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, what is a trauma hypnotist exactly? And then, we can kind of talk a little bit about the cycle breakers and a little bit about your story too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a trauma hypnotist is someone that people come to after they've been in therapy for years and they've noticed not a shift happening in their
Okay.
life, right? They feel better after like a couple talk therapy sessions, but nothing permanently changes. Or for the people who just want to skip that, like talking about their feelings, but nothing happening, and they want to get to the root cause, then they come to me. So, what we do is we work with the nervous system and the subconscious mind, which is where trauma gets rooted when it happens. And we make the shift from that space. So it's like going out to weed the garden. Talk therapy is like cutting the root of the weed or the stem of the weed where it meets the soil.
Right.
The garden looks pretty for a day or two, but the root is still there. So the plant's coming back. Whereas we go in, we dig it out from the root so that you feel profound shifts and transformations in your life that you might not have even thought was possible.
Okay. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about like where did you kind of get started with all of this and how did you basically get to where you are today?
Yeah, so I never had any plan of ending up in this space. I was a sports rehab therapist, so an athletic therapist, and a strength and conditioning coach.
Okay.
In Australia, I owned strength and conditioning facilities. That was like my goal. I remember saying to people in college, like, I can't imagine doing anything different with my life. So that's where I was. And then while I was living in Australia, my own life broke down. I'd been dating somebody for 3 years, found out I was pregnant, and a couple hours later found out that he had a girlfriend in another state. He was a compulsive liar. Most of what he had told me over our 3 years together was a complete lie.
Wow.
And my entire life fell apart. I was also paying for most of our stuff because I made more than him. Again, another lie that I found out. But I was paying the majority of our bills, so I didn't even have like the money to fly back to see my family. Um, and so I was so embarrassed about the infidelity that I didn't tell anybody I was pregnant. So a couple weeks later, I ended up having a miscarriage, and I went through that completely alone. It literally brought me to my knees to the point where I was moments away from committing suicide.
Oh
I
my God.
definitely feel like God intervened and was like, I'm not done with you yet. So I started my healing journey, and I started with talk therapy. I don't want to hate on talk therapy. I think it's really good to help you logically understand, A, that you have trauma. I had been abused by my stepmom growing up, but up until I went to talk therapy, I didn't see it as abuse.
Right.
So that talk therapy helped me in that way, but it didn't really shift anything else. So spent thousands of dollars there that I didn't really have, didn't really get a shift. Started going to the rah-rah motivational events, hiring life coach after life coach, and people just kept telling me, look, you can't change the past. So just focus on the future. And I'm like, cool. So I've been doing that for almost 30 years, and I'm an overachieving, people-pleasing perfectionist who just wants to kill herself.
Right.
That's not really a sustainable strategy for me moving forward. And I just randomly one day found NLP and hypnosis, which profoundly changed my life. And, being in the fitness space as well, a lot of what I was doing there was the mindset piece for people. And
Right.
so I realized that if I really wanted to make a difference in people's life, like I had gotten into the fitness industry to do, then I needed to work on the mindset. So that's when I started making the shift that way.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously NLP, I know what that is, but like maybe to our listeners, like what is that?
So NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Most people know who Tony Robbins is. That's what he's also trained in. But
Yeah.
it really stands for, so neuro is the brain. It's an understanding of how beliefs are created, how they can be changed, how we perceive and internalize external events and happenings. It's really about the foundation of like how the subconscious mind works and how it plays out in everyday life. It's the part of our mind that's really in control of things.
Okay.
The L is for language. So how do the thoughts that we think and the words that we say when we communicate, how do those impact our belief systems and how are those impacted by our beliefs? How do they kind of commingle? And then how does that ultimately create our programming or our external patterns of behavior, our habits, and things like that? So, a lot of people will talk about how it's 30 days to change a habit or 90 days or 21 days, depending on what book you read. But the truth is that it takes repetition to create that new neural pathway in the nervous system and the subconscious mind.
Right.
To create a neural pathway that's a reflex like behavior, so where we automatically get up and go to the gym or we post the content that we need to do in our business, it actually takes 400 repetitions to get it to be the habit that is like ingrained, like most people
Okay.
want. NLP and hypnosis allow us to speed up that process so that we're not having to do something 400 times and waiting for, however long that's going to take us to
Right.
get that habit set in place.
So, okay, so you got into NLP,
Mhm.
and then when did you add the hypnosis piece, or was that just part of it? Like if you kind of NLP by itself is baseline, and then as you keep learning it, does the hypnosis kick in, or is all of that taught at the same time?
So my mentor had created a form of like trauma healing hypnosis. So over a 2.5 year period, I went through all of it together. Like when
Okay.
I met her, I was like, I need to know everything that you know. And initially, again, it wasn't for me to do this as a profession. I was like, this is so profound and healing for me that I need to do like everything that you can take me through for my own healing. And so she kind of ran it as like a joint heal yourself plus become certified. And I was like, okay, the certifications are a bonus. I don't really care about that.
Right.
Uh, but I ended up being like, I'm really good at this. I really love helping people with this. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was over about a 2.5 year period. I did both together.
Okay. And then how long have you been doing it?
So I trained about 10 years ago. And
Okay.
working with people for free as I was going through it over those 2.5 years, just to practice it. I also had another business, so it was more of just a hobby. And then my current business, that was all in Australia. I lost everything one other time in Australia, came back to Canada, and now live in the US. So I started my business in its current form in 2000, end of 2017, beginning of 2008. So
Okay.
about 7 years now.
So okay, so now we're in the cycle breakers.
Yeah.
And what would you say are kind of like, I think you said you work with business owners, right? Or
Yeah.
people that are stuck at a certain income level. What are kind of like the three main things or four main things you see people stuck in?
Yeah. So we predominantly work with two different groups of entrepreneurs who are stuck at the six-figure mark and just
Okay.
can't, we're right around that mark and can't seem to get over that hump. And then people who are transitioning from corporate to their own business. So they've been making six figures. But when it comes to like starting their business in the evenings or whatever, they're blocked or they can't charge, things like that. So I would say the biggest things that we see that we help people work through are um, people pleasing. So that shows up as like not being able to charge what they want to be able um, to fully support themselves, or when they're bringing on a team, not being able to delegate and like manage their team. So there's like that, oh, well, I don't want to be the mean person. I
Right.
want me to like me. It also shows up as like, I don't want to put out content that might be too polarizing for people because then people might not like me. Perfectionism is the big one. And then a lot of money blocks. So,
Yeah.
whether it's like worthiness around money or not trusting themselves with money, those are the three main areas I would say that we work with.
Okay, so let's maybe walk through a couple things. And
Yeah.
because I mean, I know for me, just helping people with like putting content out for their business, it's a big thing, right? And they're always kind of worried about what are people going to think of me? Are they going to like me? Are they not going to like me? But like no one really talks about that in the social media space, right? It's always like, oh, just put up content, but it's like, so like let's say you need to kind of walk someone through that. Like how do you get them over it? Maybe it's not as simple as like just day one, but like maybe what's one or two things you could help that person with?
Yeah, so we take everybody through what we call the RISE method. So R has two parts to it. First part is recalibrate the nervous system. So the like number one thing that people could take away from this episode would be that everything that you have in your life right now is a reflection of where your nervous system feels safe, because that's your nervous system's job, is to keep you alive by making sure that you're safe. So the amount of money in your bank account is where you feel safe, right? People tend to have a ceiling
Right.
where, as soon as they get to say $10,000 in savings or $10,000 a month or whatever it is, something happens that sabotages that cash flow or the amount of cash that they have, right? Something breaks down, they go on a shopping spree, something to like drain the reserves to come back. Or let's say they finally start making the $10,000 a month, then the next month they can't sell anything, right? So from the amount of money you have in your bank account to the types of clients that you have, the number of clients, your health, so like your physical health, your weight, your appearance, all of that, your relationships, all of that reflects where you feel safe. So if you grew up in a childhood or you had a childhood that was chaotic, right? For me, I was being abused by my stepmom every other weekend. And then my biological mom had debilitating anxiety and we had a ton of scarcity. My family, living paycheck to paycheck was normal for my family. And
Right.
so when I started making more than enough money to not be paycheck to paycheck, I would find a way to get rid of the money so that I was still paycheck to paycheck, right? Because that's
Got
where
it.
I didn't feel safe having money in the bank.
Right.
So the first thing that we start to do is recalibrate the nervous system. It doesn't matter what's going on for the person. It all starts with creating that baseline nervous system routine
Okay.
so that we can start to expand what they feel comfortable with. Because what people don't realize is like all the self-sabotage patterns, whether it's procrastination or inconsistency, all of those are actually survival patterns. It's your nervous system saying, we're getting too far outside of that comfort zone. I need to come back. And so it's a survival pattern, right? If we get too far away, I don't know if I'll be able to protect myself. I don't know what could harm me or hurt me. So we need to come back to this place where I feel safe. So we start to regulate the nervous system, allow it to heal, come out of survival mode. A lot of people are addicted to stress, like their body chemically becomes addicted to stress hormones. In the sports world, we call them adrenaline junkies, but in the
Right.
business world, it looks like, blowing your business up every other month, starting drama, arguing with people on social media, etc. Right? So we want to start to balance those things out. The second part of R is reprogram limiting beliefs. So looking at things like I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. People will judge me or leave me or they won't like me if I do X, Y, and Z. The I in the RISE method is inner child healing. So when we experience big emotions at young ages, let's say the first time your mom took you to the toy store, you were two, wouldn't buy you the toy that you wanted, you felt anger and you threw a temper tantrum, right? I don't know about you, but when I was that age, it was get up or I'll give you something to cry about. I got sent to my room, but there was never any actually teaching about how
Right.
to emotions. It was all just like suppression techniques, right? So part of our psyche actually gets stuck at that age. So what then happens is we're in adult bodies, we're running businesses, raising kids, adulting, but then we have these inner children, these part of our psyche that are stuck at a younger age, a less developed age. And so we revert back to those in times of stress. So people are trying to run a business with the fear of a 1 year old
Got
or
it. Okay.
the sadness of a 3 year old or the guilt of a 7 year old. So we need to heal those parts so that part of the psyche can kind of catch up to where you're at. So everybody's adulting, right? I always relate it to road rage is not how an adult responds to sitting in traffic. That's the 2 year old throwing the temper tantrum for not getting what they wanted. So we
Got
want
it.
to heal those parts. The S is shift your identity. So some identities are given to us and some identities we take on. I had one client who grew up being called the dumb blonde in her family. She is brilliant in what she does. She was approached by Dean Graciosi to do some work within his business. And all she had to do was send a proposal, and it was basically the job was hers. Didn't send the proposal, just
Oh,
totally
wow.
sabotage the opportunity because a dumb blonde doesn't work for, a 7, 8 figure business owner.
Right.
And so she sabotaged the opportunity. So that was an identity that we had to heal. There's a lot of people who have like the good girl or good boy identity. So it's like, I have to toe the line. I can't step too far out of bounds. I can't be too polarizing, all of those. So we want to shift those identities, let go of the negative parts of them so that they can become who they're supposed to become, the successful business owner, the alpha, whatever they want to be.
Right.
And E is the expansion part. So, how do we integrate some lifestyle habits that are going to allow you to continue growing, to continue expanding so that you realize your full potential? So, other than the recalibrate the nervous system, we start everybody there. The other parts of the RISE method depend on where the person is stuck when we meet
Sure.
them. We'll take them through all the steps, but where we start kind of depends on where they're at.
Okay. So, I mean, I work with a lot of chiropractors and I feel like they all talk about the nervous system.
Yeah.
It's all about your nervous system, but I don't really ever hear them say, well, here's how you regulate your nervous system, or here's something you could do, to help regulate that. Do you have anything, practical that you teach, people how to do that?
Yeah, so the easiest, fastest way to regulate your nervous system, and there's kind of like steps to it.
Right.
So we create a nervous system routine, and I'm happy to give everybody our 7 day nervous system reset, which is 7 exercises that people can try out. You don't have to do all 7 every day, but there's 7 there for you to kind of see what you like the best. And these exercises are going to release the pent up energy from your nervous system. So if you've ever watched, like, have you ever watched Animal Planet or like any of the
Yeah.
safari shows? So you see like the lion or the lioness, the cheetah, whatever, attack the gazelle, right? And the gazelle just plays dead in an attempt to save its life. So for whatever reason, the cheetah decides this gazelle meat not good, so they wander off. As soon as the gazelle is sure that it's safe, it stands up and you'll see the gazelle shake, right? And it'll shake for however long. Dogs do this, cats do this. That's how they release the energy, the traumatic energy from their nervous system before they run away. This is why other animals don't have trauma the way that humans do. But the primal part of our brain, our reptilian brain, wants to do that, but our higher level thinking, our neocortex, often overrides it because let's say, you're just held up at gunpoint in a dark alley and you somehow
Right.
get away. It's probably not the best idea, or people might judge you if you start shaking everywhere, right? So, or if you start deep breathing or crying or whatever. Um, and so we override that and we just end up suppressing it, which keeps the energy in our nervous system. And that's what creates the impression, the like indents or impressions on the nervous system that
Got it.
create self-sabotage patterns. So the 7 exercises that we give, we've got 3 breathing exercises in there. Box breathing is a very popular breathing exercise that people will use for anxiety. That's one of the ones that we share in our 7-day nervous system reset, because your breath is one of the ways that we can like immediately regulate in the moment.
Right.
And then from there, as we go through a process with people, we'll also look at regulating the nervous system by offloading the emotional baggage, by, changing up their diet if they're eating a lot of processed foods. That's not going to be great for the nervous system either. Changing the kind of music they listen to or the TV shows that they watch, getting them out in nature more, looking at their exercise patterns and adding in some exercise if they're not doing any, right? So that's what I mean when there's levels.
Got
But
it.
the easiest is like breathing,
Breathing.
movement. So like, how when if you had a really stressful day, you've got that energy pent up in your nervous system, and going for a run or going and lifting heavy weights feels good.
Right.
There's two ways that we can regulate in the moment. One is to burn, so that like movement, running, heavy lifting, etc., boxing, etc. And then there's the soothing, which is like the breathing exercises and some other things like compression on the nervous system, so weighted blankets, tight hugs from other people or to ourself. That helps regulate the nervous system as well.
Got it. Okay. Cool. So all right. So you work with a lot of people, obviously, that, have this stuff going on all the time. Like, what is this mainly caused because of trauma that's happened in somebody's life, or like, and they bring it into being a business owner, or like, what do you see as kind of the common, kind of common theme with business owners?
Yeah, so I mean, when we look at limiting beliefs alone, 95% of our belief systems are installed in the mind between the
Hmm.
ages of 0 and 7,
Okay.
before we even understand what the world's about. And then 60% or more of people's belief systems, if they've done nothing to like consciously change them, are negative.
Okay.
The thing is between the ages of 0 and 7, we pick up everything that's being said to us, things that are being said about us, even conversations happening around us. So like I had a lot of money blocks when I started my business that kept me hitting the six-figure ceiling for a long time. And it was because growing up, again, we lived paycheck to paycheck. My parents would have friends who we would see often, and then they would start making more money at some point. I'm not sure what that looked like, but my parents would stop talking to them and start talking negatively about them. So my parents never said to me, if you have money, you're a bad person.
Right.
But I picked up on well, if you make too much money, people are going to talk shit about you.
Right.
So it's safer not to make too much money.
Got it. Okay.
Right. And so that's part of it. The other part is when people think about trauma, they typically think what are called big T traumas. So, like the physical, sexual abuse, war, things like that. And those absolutely can hold people back. What's more common, though, is what are called little T traumas. And so these are more everyday occurrences or things that are brushed off as everyday. They're the things that are looked at as like, well, it didn't kill you, it made you stronger, but it's almost like a
Right.
death of a thousand cuts, right? So one of the most common childhood little T traumas that I see impacting business owners is the parentified child. So where they had to parent their parent in some way. Maybe their parent had a physical or a mental disability or condition where they felt like they had to look after them. My mom had debilitating anxiety. So even from a young age, I knew that I had to handle my big emotions. I couldn't take it to her because she wouldn't be able to handle it.
Got it.
And the younger we are, the more we have this belief of like, if my parents are safe, then I'm safe. So I was like, well, I can't tell her I'm being abused when I'm with my biological dad. I just have to deal with it
Hold
myself.
it
I'm
in and
the wrong one. I see
wow.
a lot of people who, maybe their parents drank a lot, and so they had to like clean up their parents' vomit or make sure that they were on their side so they didn't die. Or they had parents who just couldn't adult for them. And so they had to look after their siblings, or they had to go and get a job when dad passed away and they became the man of the house, or, their parents just couldn't handle it. And so they were having to cook for themselves and, look after themselves. They didn't get the full childhood experience.
Okay.
Tends
Wow.
to show up a lot for business owners where now they struggle to set boundaries. They feel like it's their job to take care of everybody else. So if they're on a sales call with somebody and somebody's like, I can't really afford that, they're like, okay, well, it's my responsibility to help you figure out how to afford it, right? Instead of
Right.
being, okay, well, that's that's something that you have to figure out to solve. It's like, well, I could do a payment plan that I don't normally do and take on more risk, or I could, rescue you in some way, give you my stuff for free, et cetera, et cetera. So that's probably the most common one that I see showing up. The fear of abandonment and rejection, which can come from childhood as well, being bullied, parents leaving, parents not being able to be there for you emotionally. Um, all of those can lead to like fear of abandonment, rejection, humiliation. So that stops people from feeling safe putting out content and brings up like that. What if they judge me? What if they don't like me?
So a lot of this is like, how do I feel safe, and what conditions do I need to create in my external environment so I feel safe internally? That kind of sounds like that's like the common theme, right?
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, we're not going to do something that could kill us. And
Right.
anything outside of that proverbial comfort zone, then we don't know what could harm us, what could kill us. And so then people will start to self-sabotage.
Got
So
it. Okay.
it's about how do we internally create the sense of safety. There's the saying, one of my mentors said to me a while ago, and it just fits, is like, it's not, there's the saying, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
Most people don't live their life in a place of comfort. I know it's called the comfort zone, but it's really more the familiar zone, right? Like
Right.
it wasn't comfortable for me living paycheck to paycheck. It's not comfortable for somebody to be 50 pounds overweight or, to be struggling to get clients or having to go out and hunt all the time for new clients to keep the cash flowing, right? None of that is comfortable. So most people are already comfortable in that space because it's familiar. What we
Right.
need to be is feel confident and certain in our abilities to navigate uncertainty. And so we
Got
have
it.
to strip away the pieces of our past that have basically told us that we're not capable or that we're not strong enough, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's I mean a kind of a common thing I think I see with business owners. And, I could have a tendency to either perfectionism or yeah, just like always thinking I got to make this better, right? Or it's got to be perfect before I launch it. I think I've seen you write quite a bit of stuff on there, but like what would you say to the perfectionist, who's like, I can't do this because it's not perfect yet? Like, when you meet like a business owner, like what's the thing that you see in them that you're like, hey, this is what you need to kind of stop and do at that moment?
So for somebody who's a perfectionist, everything kind of comes back to five core childhood wounds. So there's abandonment, rejection, betrayal, humiliation, and injustice, which is like the it's not fair. So like the
Got it.
racism, ageism fits in the injustice. So, as somebody who was a perfectionist as well, I had a deep humiliation wound where it was like there were times in my life where I was bullied for not knowing the answer or where I was judged or shamed for getting something wrong. And so, like off the bat, I would remind people that perfectionism is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like you and I
Right.
both go and see a movie, and one of us be like, oh, that was perfection. And the other person be like, that was the worst thing ever. Like we're never going to satisfy everybody,
Right.
especially people who don't like themselves, right? Um, in terms of the work, we would figure out what were the moments in your life where you felt, where you created this pattern of perfectionism, where you felt like, maybe you believed that somebody would abandon you if you weren't perfect.
Right.
Maybe, like me, you heard your parents talking negatively about people who made mistakes. Or one thing I see with a lot of entrepreneurs is they've had teachers who bullied them or belittled them or humiliated them for getting an answer wrong in school. And so that kind of drives the perfectionism. So we figure out, like, was it a parent? Was it a sibling? Was it a teacher? Was it a boss? Was it a bully? Like, where in your life were these moments where you created or validated the pattern that you had to be perfect in order to be liked, accepted, safe, etc. So those are the moments that we would look for. And
Got
that's
it.
how we would use the hypnosis to go back and heal.
And I can, for me, like I was a pretty big athlete in high school. So it was always like, had to score a certain amount of touchdowns, and it was like never enough for my parents or at least my dad. It's like, dude, I scored like 4 touchdowns. I got like 15 tackles. It's like, but you missed like, three others, right?
Yeah.
I know that, even like I have my son who's now in high school and I'm like, I catch myself sometimes like doing that. And I'm like, dude, okay, like you gotta do like the opposite of this, So like I know that kind of comes with us, regardless, but like it still comes up no matter how much we work on it.
I used to work amateur sports and like minor sports. I worked hockey when I was in Canada, and like the best players on the team, I would just listen to their dads come and get them, and they'd be so excited, like, Dad, I got a hat trick. And their dad would be like, Yeah, but you could have had 5 goals. You missed those two, right? So, and I understand, like, I'm not an advocate for participation trophies either. I don't think that
Right.
solves the problem. But what we need to do is we need to focus on the effort first and then the results, right? Because effort leads to results. And what most people who are perfectionists, and it came from a sports setting like that, or even grades, like for me, I would come home with a 97% on a test in high school while I basically also had a full-time job and I was working with like every sports team in the school. And I'm winning all these awards, and I'd get 97% on a test, and my dad would be like, What happened to the other 3%? I was like it was never, I could have gotten
Yeah.
100%, and he would
It
have been
was
like,
never good
what happened?
enough.
Yeah, like, why didn't you get 110, right? And so what we have to understand is like, you can, let's say your son plays football, you can focus on like, what do you think you did really well in that game first? And then where do you think you can improve in the future? And that's an exercise that I get people to do with themselves. First, start with, how did I show up for myself today? What actions did I take that moved me towards my goal? And then what are my areas for improvement tomorrow? And even the wording is really specific, right? Not like, where did you mess up? Where
Right.
did you F up? Blah, blah, blah. But what are my opportunities for growth? What are my opportunities for improvement? But we want to look at, here's what I did first, because when we start to celebrate the effort, what it does is it gives us a good dopamine hit. And what we know is that dopamine in the brain strengthens the neural pathways to take the same action again. And so that's why scrolling your phone becomes so addictive, is because you're constantly getting that hit that makes you want to constantly keep scrolling. So if we start celebrating like even the micro milestones on the way to our goal, then it strengthens the neural pathways to keep taking action so that we take more action tomorrow. Now we're getting that dopamine hit again because we're celebrating all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like me and my husband, we run the business together. We will celebrate a $37 sale just the same as we celebrate a $30,000 sale, right? Like both of them get recognized in our minds because the actions that led to the $37 sale repeated enough times will lead to the $30,000 sale. So,
That's
um,
awesome. Have you
yeah.
read the book Tiny Habits?
I haven't read Tiny Habits, but I read Atomic Habits, which apparently
Yeah.
came Tiny.
Okay, so I like Tiny Habits better because they actually have a thing called the habit recipe. And it at the end of it, it talks about how in order to reinforce a habit, you got to celebrate it. Obviously, the ones that we want to keep, right? So if it
Yeah.
was like I just got done working out, me doing like a fist pump, clapping my hands for 5 seconds reinforces that habit. But they say what gets celebrated gets repeated. But like when people think about habits, they don't really think about celebrating them, but they talk about how it, reprograms your mind to want to continue to do that, kind of like what you're talking about.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I do with people is like what we focus on expands, right? So what most
Yeah.
people do is they hone in on the mistakes they made that day. So let's say you've got somebody who's an emotional eater, and every time they're feeling stressed or anxious, they go to the fridge and they grab a piece of chocolate. Well, let's say today, 4 times I went to the fridge and I caught myself opening the fridge, and then I went and did my other action plan, right? I went for a walk, I went and did 10 jumping jacks, whatever. Went outside, meditated for a minute, whatever it is. But one time I went to the fridge and I got the piece of chocolate. What most people will do is they'll beat themselves up over the one time
Right.
that they fell off the wagon, and they'll beat themselves up, but that's bringing their focus there. We have this part of our subconscious mind called the reticular activating system, and it has no capacity for logic. It just says it takes the things that you focus on and says, this is what they want more of. So if you're constantly talking about how broke you are, then your reticular activating system just says, they want more broke. Here's more broke, right? They want more scarcity. Here's more scarcity. They want to go to the fridge and eat more chocolate. Here's more opportunities for that. So, what we want to do is at the end of the day, when we're celebrating, like, here's all the ways that I showed up. I call it showing up for your future self, but here's all the ways that I showed up for my goal or whatever. Then, if we only focus on those and we completely disregard the one time that we fell off the bandwagon, then this is what the 4 times is what our reticular activating system is going to say, oh, they want more of that. Okay, we'll create more opportunity. We'll bring that opportunity into their awareness more often.
Got it.
So
That's
that's a really
awesome.
powerful way to reprogram as well.
Yeah. I quit chewing tobacco in 2016, and I quit because I read the book The Power of Habit, and it's like talks about replacing dopamine with dopamine. So what I did is every time I craved to chew, I was like, I wonder if I could just do 20 push-ups and it would curb the craving. And so I started, I think my first like week, it was like 400 or 500 push-ups a day. And I was like, man, what the heck? By the second week, I dropped down to like 300. And then by the end of the second week, I'm like, why am I craving chew? And so it always had to do with having a conversation with somebody else that maybe triggered me or frustrated me. And I started to kind of recognize that I was almost like lying in between. Every time I wanted to chew, I started to associate it with lying to myself about how I felt in the moment. And so after like 3 weeks, I started to kind of recognize like, okay, well, so like my brain doesn't really know the difference between dopamine with chew or dopamine with exercise. It just wants dopamine.
Mhm.
And I kind of like reverse engineered my own like addiction out of that. And I'm like, oh, I quit chewing by doing push-ups, but it wasn't the push-ups that I needed. It was the hit of dopamine. And then once I kind of realized that obviously chewing and lying are not very attractive, that and exercise obviously is, but it just helped me associate that when I crave that, there was something more, triggering with my nervous system. So it's like the fact that you're talking about dopamine. I mean, I think exercise, obviously there's laughing and some of those things, but I mean, it's really the only dopamine we can get that's healthy while we have so much stuff right now, like social media, alcohol, drugs, all these other things that are like terrible for us. But just how our nervous system doesn't know what the difference in dopamine is. It just knows it needs it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a really great book called The Molecule of More, which is all about dopamine. And there's like
Okay.
different dopamine pathways. One is the here and now pathway, which is what gives us like that instant gratification hit. And
Right.
then the long-term hit of dopamine, which comes more from like the gratitude practices and like the celebrating the milestones. It was a really interesting book. So
Nice. That's awesome.
on it
All
as
right.
well.
So tell me, all right. So I got a lot of business owners, but like tell some of the business owners like who I work with, like how they get a hold of you, how they, find out more about your program.
Yeah, so the if you want the 7 day nervous system reset, you can go to resetmysystem.com/reset. There's going to be those 7 exercises you can check out. That'll also link you to our community where we do free workshops every week. We have a ton of free content in there that you can check out at your own pace and see what we do. If you look up Tiffany Clevenger on any social media platform, you'll find me. We're most active on Facebook and TikTok, but you can find us anywhere and then just shoot me a message there.
Okay, cool. And if you guys are listening to the show, you can obviously go into the show notes and it'll have a direct link to reset mysystem.com/reset. And you can either click on that or you can go direct link to Tiffany. Any last words for that entrepreneur out there who might be, struggling with some of the things we talked about?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I would leave people with is what helps you get to your goal faster is making your nervous system feel safe with that goal. So, healing the nervous system, reprogramming the limiting beliefs that are in the way between you and your goal. So, maybe you want more money, but you're worried about people judging you or thinking you're greedy. When we clear those up, your nervous system's going to feel safer to get there. So you end up getting there faster. Self sabotage will clear itself up on its own. Like you can use willpower, but that's like the hard button, right? There's a
Right.
easier way. And if you need willpower to get there the first time, it's just going to continually get harder. And you're going to need more and more willpower, which we only have so much of every single day. So, the fastest way, the easy button, is to regulate the nervous system, reprogram the mind, and you'll get there a lot faster.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for being on today. I got a ton from this, and I know a lot of people in my network that I work with personally struggle with a lot of these things because I feel like we talk about them all the time. But thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So if you guys are looking to connect with a group of like-minded people, you can definitely go into the show notes and go to our free Facebook group, Habit Based Lifestyle and Business Secrets. Again, if you guys want to connect with Tiffany, I know a lot of the things she talked about today are very common in the business world, but she's a pro at helping people, and basically she's created the cycle breakers for a reason. So, if you guys have any questions or have an episode you want to hear, you can always reach out to me, Jesse at Habit Based Lifestyle. Until next episode, have a great day.